Now, Percy not only edited the book for Mary, he also wrote the preface for the 1818 version. Now, by the time the 1834 version came around, Percy was dead. He drowned in Lake Geneva during a storm. He couldn't swim. And so then Mary wrote a new preface for it, and she also made some changes in the text. And if you get an 1834 text, I am very familiar with the 1818, not so familiar with the 1834. It is my understanding that the way that Elizabeth came into the lives of the Frankensteins are quite different. And I know this because when I was teaching it in the seated class, a poor student had the 1834 and she couldn't figure out what the rest of us were talking about. And so that is why I told you to get the 1818 version. But Percy wrote the preface. And the 1834 preface goes into more detail about, and by the way, in 1818, nobody knew who had written the book. They didn't know it was Mary Shelley. By 1834, everybody knew. And so she wrote it from the point of view of, hey, I'm Mary Shelley. But she goes into more depth in the 1834 preface about the circumstances of the creature and how the idea about why people think electricity was what brought the creature to life, when it never mentions it in the book. Never says that electricity is used, even though there is the part about the the tree being struck by lightning. But in that, she talks about an experiment that somebody was supposed to have done, and they even brought vermicelli, which is a type of macaroni, to life. And she even says, Percy says in the preface to the 1818 that she says, this fiction is founded, has been supposed by Dr. Darwin and some of the physiological writers of Germany, and that is referring to the experiments with electricity, or as it was known, galvanism. So I'm not so concerned with the preface at this point, but I do want to launch into the letters from Robert Walton to his sister. This book is, of course, told in the epistolary style, and this was very common in this era, and also later in the Romantic era, in the Victorian era, in this pre-Victorian era. The Brontes did this, Jane Austen did this, and so did, obviously, Mary Shelley. She was a precursor. So we're actually getting this story third hand. Later in the book, Victor's telling it to Robert, Robert's telling it to his sister, but at the beginning we hear some about Robert Walton, and we see some parallels between him and Victor Frankenstein. For one thing, they were kind of both raised in a certain way. They were both kind of loners, and it seemed that Robert was raised by his sisters, and so they do have things in common. And this is why when Victor then comes on the boat, it is why they have such a simpatico. And Walton wants a friend. The creature wants a friend as well. Victor loses his friend later in the book, and if you haven't read it, I'm not going to say anything else about that. So Walton is setting himself up for his friendship with Victor, but I also want to discuss about what Walton is doing on the boat going to the northern lands. And let me find here what I'm looking at. It's on page 10 in my book, but it is in just before the letter 3. Walton is going to the north because during this time, it was thought that perhaps there was a paradise hidden in the ice floes of the north. The north was kind of seen as a promised land. And it was seen as purity, and there was this great fascination with it. People were also looking for the Northwest Passage still, even at this time. But on this page that I was talking about, just before letter 3, Walton says, I am going to unexplored regions, to the land of mist and snow, but I shall kill no albatross. Therefore, do not be alarmed for my safety. Or if I should come back to you as worn and woeful as the ancient mariner, you will smile at my allusion. And he, of course, is referring to the rhyme of the ancient mariner, where a ship full of men We're in the north, and one of them kills an albatross, which is strictly forbidden, and then has this cloud hanging over him, the albatross hanging around his neck, and he is doomed. Robert says that he is going to avoid killing the albatross, but he is pushed on by hubris, and hubris is an important theme in this book, and hubris is overwhelming pride. It is pride that gets you into trouble, and Victor is very guilty of this in the creation of his his creature. So Walden is seeking something beyond himself, and he is seeking the north. He's seeking the mysteries. What is it about the magnetic north? He wants to pierce the secrets of nature, just as Victor says when he gets to Ingolstadt and begins to study about life. So in this first couple of parts, I want the preface and the letters. That is what I want to impress upon you. First of all, is told in the epistolary style, and I want you to think about what are the problems with that. I asked you before about what is the problem with first-person narration. Well, this is not only first-person narration, but it's told in the point of view of letters. What kind of drawbacks are there to that type of narration? And also in the preface, he meets Victor, is very taken with him, becomes to admire him, and has found a friend. And that is going to bring us up to chapter 1.